Stop what you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear could be the most important thing you'll ever listen to. And I'm not saying that to get your attention. I'm saying it because it's the uncomfortable truth that most people spend their entire lives never confronting. Your brain is running a program that was written before you were born. And right now, at this very second, it is making decisions for you that you believe are yours. Decisions about your career, your relationships, your money, your future. Except here's what nobody ever tells you. You didn't choose most of those choices. A biological machine running ancient code chose them for you. Here's the number that will wreck you. The average person makes roughly 35,000 decisions every single day. 35,000. And neuroscience has confirmed that 95% of them happen before your conscious mind even gets involved. Before you finish a single thought, your brain has already decided. It has already judged. It has already acted. Think about what that means for your life. Every opportunity you passed up, every relationship you stayed in too long or left too soon, every investment you made, every one you didn't, every time you played it safe, every time you blew it wide open. In almost every case, a subconscious system, running shortcuts designed for cavemen, was driving the car while you sat in the passenger seat, believing you were in control. The world's most successful people aren't smarter than you. They don't have better instincts than you. What they have, the one thing that separates them from everyone else, is a different operating system for their mind. A system built not on instinct, but on architecture. Not on hope, but on frameworks. Not on talent, but on trained deliberate thought. By the time this audiobook ends, you will have that system. You will understand why your brain has been sabotaging you and exactly how to stop it. You will know how to cut through noise, eliminate emotional static, and make decisions with a clarity that most people will never experience in their entire lifetime. You will have a complete mental toolkit for navigating the most complex, high-pressure, and consequential choices life can throw at you. But I need to be honest with you right now. Knowledge alone changes nothing. Millions of people read books, attend seminars, and listen to podcasts. And then they go home and do exactly what they've always done. Don't be that person. Don't let this audiobook become background noise, because the difference between where you are today and where you want to be isn't intelligence. It isn't luck. It isn't timing. It's decision quality. And that starts right here. Let's begin. The hidden machinery. Behind every choice you make, you think you're in control. You're not. Not fully. Not even close. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can actually do something about it. Here is the first hard truth of sharp thinking. Human beings are not rational decision makers. We are rationalizing ones. There is a profound difference. A rational decision maker gathers data, analyzes options, and chooses based on evidence. A rationalizing decision maker makes a choice emotionally, almost instantly, and then builds a logical story around it to justify what was already decided. That's you. That's everyone. Your brain didn't evolve to help you build a great career or make wise financial moves. It evolved to keep you breathing in an environment full of predators and rivals. It is obsessively efficient. It detects threats. It seeks rewards. It avoids effort. And it is extraordinarily bad at the kinds of decisions modern life demands. The mental shortcuts your ancestors used, fear of the unknown, instant gratification, copying the crowd, kept them alive on the savannah. In today's world, those same shortcuts are costing you your future. Let's name the most dangerous ones. The availability trap. Your brain doesn't measure risk accurately. It measures risk by how easily it can remember similar events. That's why people in Chicago fear a violent home invasion more than they fear their daily commute, even though the commute statistically kills far more people every year. Vivid, memorable, emotionally charged events feel more likely, regardless of the actual numbers. When you make decisions based on what you can easily recall, rather than what data actually shows, you are operating with a fundamentally broken risk calculator. Confirmation bias. This is the destroyer. Once your brain decides something is true, it begins filtering all incoming information to support that belief. It's not laziness. It's biology. Your neural architecture literally rewires to reinforce existing beliefs, discarding contradictory evidence as irrelevant, biased, or threatening. This means that without deliberate intervention, you will continue gathering the same kinds of evidence, reaching the same kinds of conclusions, making the same kinds of mistakes. Forever. The loop never breaks unless you break it manually. The herd instinct. Human beings are tribal animals. When you face uncertainty, your brain's default move is to look around, see what everyone else is doing, and assume that must be correct. This worked brilliantly when surviving meant staying with the group. Today, it causes otherwise intelligent people to pour their savings into speculative assets because their neighbors did, accept jobs they hate because that's what you do, and stay in cities, relationships, and situations that no longer serve them because leaving the herd feels dangerous. History's greatest financial disasters, from the Dutch tulip frenzy of the 1630s to the dot-com collapse of 2001 to the housing crisis of 2008, were not caused by stupid people making stupid decisions. They were caused by smart, capable people following the herd off a cliff. Loss aversion. Research pioneered by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky revealed something deeply unsettling. The psychological pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. You are hardwired to fear loss more than you desire growth. This means you cling to bad investments, stay in unfulfilling careers, and endure failing relationships. Not because logic tells you to, but because your brain classifies any significant change as a potential catastrophe. You are not trapped by your circumstances. You are trapped by your brain's threat detection system, which treats the idea of change the same way it would treat a predator in the bushes. The sunk cost fallacy. You've invested 3 years in a business that isn't working. You've given 5 years to a relationship that drains you. You've spent a semester studying a major you despise. Logic says, cut your losses. Your brain says, keep going, because stopping means admitting that everything you've already invested was wasted. The resources are gone regardless. Whether you spend more doesn't recover them. Yet humans pour millions of hours and billions of dollars into failing endeavors every year, simply because we cannot emotionally accept that some losses are already locked in. Anchoring. The first number you hear about anything becomes the reference point for every judgment that follows. This is why car dealerships show you the MSRP before offering a deal. It's why salary negotiators name their number first. It's why a bottle of wine listed at $90 suddenly seems reasonable when the table next to it is priced at $200. Your brain latches onto that initial anchor and refuses to let go, even when it's completely arbitrary. The planning fallacy. Ask yourself honestly, how many projects have you finished exactly on time, exactly on budget, exactly as planned? Almost none. Research consistently shows that humans systematically underestimate how long things take, how much they cost, and how many obstacles will appear. We focus on the ideal scenario and mentally edit out the 1,000 ways things can go sideways. The result: missed deadlines, broken commitments, budgets that spiral, and a persistent sense of being behind. These are not character flaws. They are architectural features of the human brain. The most brilliant, successful, psychologically healthy people on earth are subject to every single one of these biases. The difference is that exceptional decision makers have built systems, deliberately constructed mental frameworks that account for these limitations and work around them. That is what you are building right now. The architecture of a sharp mind. Most people confuse thinking clearly with thinking fast. They're not the same thing. In fact, they're often opposites. Clarity is not about processing speed. It's not about intelligence or education or vocabulary. Clarity is about seeing reality as it actually is, not as you fear it might be, not as you wish it were, not as your biases filter it to appear. Clear thinking is the ability to look at a situation, a choice, a person, or a problem and see it with minimal distortion. That's a far harder skill than being smart. And it starts with something most productivity culture completely ignores: emotional regulation as foundation. Your emotions are not the enemy of sharp thinking. They are, however, extremely bad at their current job, which is making important life decisions. Your emotions evolved as a rapid response system for survival emergencies. Fear floods your system when you encounter a threat. Anger mobilizes you for confrontation. Joy drives you toward rewards. These responses happen in milliseconds. They are powerful, and they are extraordinarily blunt instruments. When you are emotionally activated, angry, anxious, humiliated, infatuated, your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational analysis, complex planning, and impulse control, is functionally compromised. The limbic system, your brain's ancient emergency center, seizes control and pushes you toward immediate, instinct-driven responses. This is why decisions made in the heat of the moment almost never look wise in the morning. The first rule of sharp thinking: never make consequential decisions while emotionally flooded. But here's the nuance most people miss. Emotions are not simply obstacles to clear thinking. They are also sources of information that pure logic cannot access. Your gut feeling about a person, the quiet unease that something is off, often reflects pattern recognition happening below conscious awareness. Experienced professionals in medicine, finance, and leadership frequently report that their instincts precede their analysis, and that dismissing those instincts has cost them dearly. The skill is learning to distinguish between emotions that carry useful signal and emotions that introduce noise. Fear of physical danger? Listen to it. Fear of embarrassment in front of strangers? Interrogate it. Passion for a project? Trust it provisionally. Passion for a get-rich-quick scheme? Proceed with extreme skepticism. Perspective as a tool. Your brain at any given moment is processing a tiny fraction of available reality. It is filtering through your current concerns, your dominant fears, your active hopes. That filter determines what you see, what you miss, and how you interpret everything in between. Change the filter, and you literally change what's visible. One of the most practical perspective tools is what strategic thinkers call temporal shifting. Before committing to any significant decision, ask yourself 3 questions. How will I feel about this in 10 minutes? How about 10 months? How about 10 years? This simple practice immediately reveals whether you're making a decision optimized for short-term comfort or long-term value. The majority of regrettable decisions fail the 10-year test completely. They solve an immediate discomfort at the cost of a future you actually want. Passing up a difficult but valuable opportunity because it feels uncomfortable right now. Avoiding a necessary conversation because the short-term friction feels unbearable. spending money on instant gratification instead of building toward financial freedom. Every one of these decisions feels logical in the moment and reveals itself as a mistake over time. Information quality control. The quality of your decisions is directly determined by the quality of the information feeding them. Most people are shockingly undisciplined about this. They treat social media commentary as equivalent to expertise. They mistake vivid anecdotes from friends for representative data. They confuse correlation, two things happening together, with causation, one thing causing another. High-quality information meets three criteria. First, accuracy. It reflects verifiable reality, not someone's interpretation of reality filtered through their own biases and incentives. Second, relevance. It actually applies to your specific situation, not a superficially similar one. Third, recency. It reflects current conditions, not assumptions made 5 years ago that may no longer hold. When you are about to make an important decision, audit your information. Ask, where did this come from? Who has an interest in me believing it? How old is it? How would I verify it independently? Systems thinking. The sharpest thinkers in every field share a particular cognitive habit. They see systems, not events. Where most people see an isolated incident, systems thinkers see a pattern embedded in a larger structure. They ask not just what happened, but why did it happen and what will happen next as a result? The practical implication is powerful. Before making any significant choice, ask yourself what the second-order consequences are. What happens after what happens? If I take this action, what reactions does it trigger? How do those reactions ripple outward through the other domains of my life? A career move is not just about a new salary. It changes your daily environment, your relationships, your stress profile, your available time. A relationship decision affects not just two people, but entire social networks, family systems, and long-term emotional trajectories. A financial commitment ripples outward through years of constraint or freedom. Systems thinkers live at a different altitude than event-level thinkers. And that altitude is where the best decisions are made. Intellectual humility. This is the attribute that distinguishes truly exceptional decision-makers from merely talented ones. Intellectual humility means holding your own conclusions lightly. It means actively seeking out the evidence that might prove you wrong. It means treating your current beliefs as hypotheses, not convictions. Always open to revision in the face of better information. This is uncomfortable. Your ego has invested in being right. Admitting you were wrong feels like losing. But here's the reframe. Being wrong is not a failure. It is data. The person who updates their beliefs quickly in the face of new evidence makes dramatically better decisions over time than the person who defends their existing position at all costs. Practice saying, "I don't know," out loud. Seek out the smartest critics of your ideas. Ask people who disagree with you to explain their reasoning in detail with genuine curiosity rather than adversarial intent. The goal is not to win the argument. The goal is to get the decision right. Emotional intelligence and the science of better judgment. There is a version of emotional intelligence that has been sold to the public as a soft skill, something for human resources training and team-building workshops. That is not what we're talking about here. The emotional intelligence that transforms decision-making is not about being nicer or more empathetic, though those things matter. It is about developing surgical precision in understanding what your emotional states are actually telling you and using that information strategically. Emotional archaeology. Every significant emotion you feel about a potential decision contains information. The challenge is that this information is rarely delivered in a clear, legible format. Instead, it arrives as a physical sensation, tightness in the chest, a rush of energy, a vague dread, an inexplicable enthusiasm, and your conscious mind has to interpret what that signal means. When a powerful emotion arises around a decision, the sharpest thinkers pause and do what might be called emotional archaeology. They dig. What specifically triggered this feeling? What is my body responding to? Does this response belong to this current situation? Or is it a ghost from a past experience that merely resembles this one? This kind of investigation often unearths insights that pure analysis cannot reach. The executive who gets an uneasy feeling about a potential business partner, despite impressive credentials, and later discovers that the unease was pattern recognition, picking up on subtle behavioral inconsistencies. The entrepreneur who feels inexplicable excitement about an unconventional idea, not because of hype, but because their deep knowledge of the market has registered an authentic opportunity that their logical mind hasn't yet articulated. Anxiety as intelligence. Anxiety is perhaps the most misunderstood emotional signal in the context of decision-making. Most people treat anxiety as an enemy to be suppressed or medicated away. In reality, anxiety is a highly sophisticated alarm system alerting you that your brain perceives a threat to something you value under conditions of uncertainty. The key question is not, how do I stop feeling anxious? It is, what exactly is this anxiety pointing at? When you interrogate anxiety rather than suppress it, it frequently yields specific, actionable information. What is the worst plausible outcome here? How likely is it, based on evidence rather than fear? What would I do if it happened? What resources do I have to navigate it? This process, systematically thinking through your worst-case scenarios, has a paradoxical effect. Rather than amplifying the fear, it diminishes it. The unknown, when made explicit, becomes manageable. Anxiety thrives in vagueness. Sharp thinking makes things concrete. The regret asymmetry. Researchers studying long-term life satisfaction have discovered a striking pattern. In the short term, people most often regret things they did. In the long term, people overwhelmingly regret things they didn't do. This finding has enormous implications for decision-making. Your brain's natural bias is toward caution and inaction, avoiding risk, maintaining the status quo, preserving what you have. This served your ancestors well in a dangerous world where most novel actions could end badly. In the modern world, where most of your best opportunities require taking calculated risks and moving toward uncertainty, this caution bias systematically pushes you away from the decisions that would most transform your life. When facing a significant choice, a bold career move, an important relationship conversation, a commitment that requires real vulnerability, project yourself forward. Imagine looking back from 10 years in the future, which will sting more, having tried and failed or having never tried at all. For most people, in most situations, inaction carries the greater long-term cost. Pride as a decision contaminant. Pride is uniquely dangerous in decision-making because it masquerades as confidence. It feels righteous. It feels like self-respect. But pride that is hardened into ego investment in your own rightness is one of the most effective destroyers of clear thinking available. Pride causes you to double down on failing strategies because reversing course would feel like an admission of weakness. It causes you to reject valuable feedback from people who could help you. It causes you to escalate commitment to decisions that clearly aren't working, because the alternative, admitting you were wrong, is psychologically intolerable. The antidote is developing what researchers call actively open-minded thinking. The habit of actively searching for reasons you might be wrong, inviting disagreement from people you respect, and reframing intellectual defeat as information rather than humiliation. The goal is not to protect your image of being right. The goal is to get better outcomes. These two goals are frequently in conflict, and the person who can choose the outcome over the ego will consistently outperform the person who cannot. The decision framework that actually works. Most people make decisions the way they choose what to eat when standing in front of an open refrigerator, scanning options until something looks appetizing, reaching for it without much conscious deliberation, and wondering later why they feel vaguely unsatisfied. This approach guarantees inconsistent, mediocre results. The world's sharpest decision makers use structured frameworks that ensure no critical factor gets overlooked, and every significant choice gets the attention it deserves. What follows is a framework I call CLEAR, and once you internalize it, you will wonder how you ever made important decisions without it. C. Clarify. Before you can make a good decision, you have to make sure you're solving the right problem. This sounds obvious. In practice, it is shockingly rare. Most people jump immediately to evaluating options without spending any time rigorously defining what decision they're actually trying to make. Are you deciding whether to leave your job, or are you deciding how to find more meaningful work? Are you deciding whether to end a relationship, or are you deciding how to communicate more honestly within it? Are you deciding whether to move to a new city? Or are you deciding how to build the kind of life that currently only seems possible somewhere else? The frame determines what solutions appear possible. A tightly defined, accurately framed question opens a completely different solution space than a vaguely articulated, misdefined one. Write your decision down as a single, clear sentence. Then, ask, what outcome am I actually trying to achieve? What values matter most to me in this situation? What are the real stakes if I get this wrong? L. List. The most common failure in A. Decision-making is not making bad choices among good options. It's failing to identify the full range of options available. When facing a significant decision, most people consider 2 or 3 possibilities, usually the most obvious ones. The best solution is often hiding in an option they initially dismissed as unrealistic. Force yourself to generate at least 5 distinct approaches to any important decision. Include options that seem impractical or unconventional. Use what strategists call the what would X do technique. How would the most successful person in your field approach this? What would someone with unlimited resources do? What would someone with no resources do? What would the person you most admire decide? Each perspective reveals a different solution space. Combining approaches that seem mutually exclusive often yields the best outcome of all. E. Evaluate. Once you have a genuine set of options, evaluate them systematically rather than impressionistically. Build a decision matrix. List your options vertically. List your evaluation criteria horizontally. Criteria might include financial impact, time cost, stress level, growth potential, alignment with your values, and effect on key relationships. Rate each option against each criterion on a consistent scale. Weight the criteria according to what matters most to you in this specific situation. This converts fuzzy emotional impressions into legible comparisons. Then step back and check your gut. Which option energizes you? Which one aligns with the person you're working to become? Which one would you be proud to explain to someone you deeply respect? Intuition and systematic analysis are not enemies. They are partners. Use both. A. Act. This is where most intelligent, capable, well-intentioned people fail completely. They analyze, they refine, they gather more information, they seek more opinions, they delay and deliberate. While the moment passes, the opportunity closes, and the decision gets made by default. Perfect information does not exist. It never will. Research across fields consistently shows that most consequential decisions can be made responsibly, with roughly 70% of the information you wish you had. Waiting for the remaining 30% typically costs more than any marginal improvement in decision quality could justify. Set a decision deadline and honor it. Once you've decided, redirect your mental energy from reconsideration to implementation. Commitment is not stubbornness. It is the recognition that a good decision executed with full commitment almost always outperforms an excellent decision executed with half-hearted ambivalence. Our review. The most underused step in the entire process. After implementing any significant decision, schedule a review. What happened? What did you predict correctly? What did you get wrong? What would you do differently? What does this reveal about your patterns? Most people treat decisions as complete once made. The sharpest decision makers treat every decision as a data point in an ongoing experiment, one that yields information they can use to upgrade their decision-making process for the next challenge. Keep a decision journal. Record your reasoning, your assumptions, your predictions. Return to it. The patterns you discover about your own thinking will be among the most valuable information you ever encounter about yourself. Long-term thinking in a world designed to distract you. Here is one of the most uncomfortable truths about modern life. The entire architecture of the digital world has been deliberately engineered to destroy your ability to think long-term, not accidentally, deliberately. Social platforms, news cycles, streaming services, notification systems, all of them are optimized to capture your present moment attention and keep you trapped in it. The more time you spend reacting to the immediate, the less capacity you have for the strategic thinking that determines long-term outcomes. The ability to think in years while everyone else thinks in minutes is one of the most powerful competitive advantages available to any person alive today. And it's becoming increasingly rare, which means it's becoming increasingly valuable. The compounding reality. Most people think about progress in linear terms. If I improve by X amount this month, I'll improve by 12X this year. That is not how meaningful progress works. Real growth compounds. Small, consistent improvements multiply on themselves in ways that produce dramatically non-linear outcomes over time. Consider a simple illustration. Two people start reading in their 20s. One reads for 30 minutes daily. One never reads at all. At the end of a year, the difference seems modest. About 20 books. At the end of a decade, the gap is enormous. 200 books spanning multiple fields. Building an interconnected web of knowledge and frameworks that transforms how everything gets perceived and processed. The same compounding dynamic operates in fitness, in relationships, in financial behavior, in technical skills, in professional reputation. The tragedy is that the early stages of compounding look almost identical to no progress at all. The habits that will eventually transform your life feel unremarkable for months, sometimes years. This is precisely the window in which most people give up. The future self technique, one of the most practical tools for building long-term thinking, is learning to hold vivid, specific, emotionally resonant images of your future self in mind when making present moment decisions. Not abstract goals, specific scenarios. Don't think about being healthier. Picture yourself at 75, hiking with your grandchildren without gasping, lifting your carry-on into the overhead bin without dreading it, sitting through a 4-hour flight without your back screaming. Don't think about having more financial security. Picture the specific freedom, the ability to walk away from work you don't believe in, to take a month off without catastrophe, to help the people you love without the gut punch of knowing you can't. The more vivid and emotionally specific this vision, the more powerfully it competes with the pull of immediate gratification. Distinguishing urgency from importance. Modern life is saturated with the urgent, the notification, the deadline, the demand, the crisis someone else created and handed to you. Most urgent things have little long-term significance. Most important things never feel urgent at all. The average professional spends the majority of their working hours responding to other people's urgencies, emails, meetings, requests, interruptions. The activities that would most dramatically improve their long-term outcomes, developing new skills, building meaningful relationships, working on the projects that actually matter, rarely feel pressing and are therefore perpetually deferred. Long-term thinkers reverse this priority structure. They protect time for the important before they attend to the urgent. They build boundaries around their most significant work. They treat strategic thinking as a non-negotiable appointment rather than a luxury to be fit in when everything else is handled. Building systems for the long game. The most reliable way to think long-term consistently is to stop relying on willpower and start building systems. Willpower is a depletable resource that fluctuates with energy, stress, sleep, and blood sugar. Systems are structures that make the beneficial choice the automatic choice. Automate your financial investments so they happen without a monthly decision. Design your physical environment so healthy food is accessible and junk food requires deliberate effort. Structure your schedule so your most important work occupies your highest energy hours before the demands of the day erode your focus. These structural choices compound just like the behaviors themselves do, each one reducing the daily friction cost of living in alignment with your long-term goals. Mental models, the hidden toolkit of world-class thinkers. Here is something that separates the best decision-makers in the world from everyone else. They carry a large, diverse collection of mental models, conceptual frameworks from multiple disciplines that help them rapidly identify what kind of situation they're in and what approaches are most likely to work. Most people navigate life with a handful of mental models, usually picked up haphazardly through personal experience. The broader and more deliberately assembled your mental model library, the more clearly you can see patterns that others miss entirely. First, principles thinking. This is the intellectual discipline of breaking a problem down to its most fundamental components and reasoning upward from verified truth rather than conventional assumption. Instead of asking, "How has this been done before?" you ask, "What do I know with certainty and what am I assuming that might not be correct?" When a Silicon Valley entrepreneur wanted to build affordable solar panels, she didn't accept the industry wisdom that manufacturing costs were essentially fixed. She broke the product down into its raw material components and discovered that the actual cost of the materials was a small fraction of the retail price. Most of the expense came from assembly processes and supply chain assumptions that could be redesigned. That first principles analysis yielded a cost structure competitors hadn't thought possible. Apply this to your own decisions. What do you know for certain about your situation? What are you assuming based on convention, precedent, or other people's experience that might not apply to yours? If you had to design a solution from scratch, ignoring all existing approaches, what would you build? Inversion. Instead of asking, "How do I succeed at this?" ask, "How would I definitely fail at this?" Then avoid those failure modes with disciplined focus. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime partner and one of the most celebrated thinkers in modern finance, attributes much of his exceptional judgment to this practice. He doesn't primarily try to find great outcomes. He tries to systematically avoid catastrophically bad ones. The results have been extraordinary. For any major decision, identify the most likely and most catastrophic failure scenarios. Then design your approach to make those scenarios as improbable as possible. This is not pessimism. It is strategic clarity. Opportunity cost. Every decision eliminates other possibilities. When you invest time in one activity, you are choosing not to invest it in everything else available to you. When you commit to one path, you foreclose others, at least temporarily. Understanding opportunity cost with genuine rigor helps you stop optimizing individual choices in isolation and start making decisions that maximize your overall results. Most people focus heavily on the cost of action. What might go wrong if they try something? They almost never calculate the cost of inaction, what they might miss, what might deteriorate, what compound growth they sacrifice by not starting. Before any significant commitment, ask, what am I giving up by choosing this? Is this the best possible use of my available time, energy, and attention? Could these resources produce even better outcomes somewhere else? Leverage points. In any complex system, certain nodes have disproportionate influence. A small change applied at a leverage point creates large, system-wide effects. A change of equivalent size applied elsewhere creates almost none. Archimedes reputedly said that given a lever long enough and a place to stand, he could move the earth. The practical application. Before investing energy in solving any problem, ask where the highest leverage intervention would be. What is the root cause that, if addressed, would resolve multiple downstream symptoms simultaneously? What skill, if developed, would create exponentially more value than any other skill you could invest the same time in? What relationship, if cultivated, would open doors that no amount of solo effort could pry open? High-leverage decisions are not always the most obvious ones. They are frequently counterintuitive. Improving your sleep quality by 2 hours might create more professional impact than working 2 additional hours every day. Having one honest conversation you've been avoiding might improve a relationship more than 100 small gestures of accommodation. Probabilistic thinking. The most sophisticated decision-makers do not seek certainty. They know it doesn't exist. Instead, they think in terms of probability distributions, mapping the full range of plausible outcomes and their relative likelihoods, then making decisions that are well-positioned across that range. This shift from binary thinking, will this work or not, to probabilistic thinking transforms how you evaluate risk. An action with a 60% chance of excellent outcome, a 30% chance of mediocre outcome, and a 10% chance of minor setback looks very different from the perspective of probabilistic analysis than it does through the lens of simple fear of failure. Ask not, will this work? But, what's the realistic probability distribution of outcomes here? And is this distribution favorable enough to justify the commitment? The 80-20 principle. In virtually every domain of human activity, roughly 80% of results come from roughly 20% of causes. This is Pareto's law, and it is one of the most consistently observed patterns in complex systems. 80% of your business revenue comes from about 20% of your clients. 80% of your daily stress comes from about 20% of your challenges. 80% of your personal happiness comes from roughly 20% of your relationships and activities. The strategic implication. Before trying to optimize everything, identify the vital 20% and focus your best resources there. This is not laziness. It is leverage applied intelligently. The highest performing people are not those who work hardest across the board. They are those who consistently identify and focus on the activities that produce disproportionate results. Deciding under pressure, when everything is on the line. Here is a truth that most decision-making advice ignores. The decisions that matter most are rarely made in comfortable conditions with unlimited time and complete information. They are made under pressure, under stress, With incomplete data and competing voices and no clear right answer in sight, your ability to make clear decisions in those moments, not in the comfortable theoretical exercises of planning sessions, but in the actual fire, determines the trajectory of your career, your relationships, and your life more than almost any other factor. Pressure compromises thinking in predictable and well-documented ways. It narrows your attention, producing tunnel vision on immediate threats while blocking out the larger strategic picture. It activates your emotional brain at the expense of your analytical brain. It creates a sense of urgency that pressures you toward fast, shallow responses rather than slower, deeper ones. And it makes you highly susceptible to the thinking errors we've already discussed. Confirmation bias, anchoring, loss aversion, all of them become more powerful under stress. Slow your mind when the world speeds up. The most counterintuitive but consistently validated principle of high-stakes decision-making. When external pressure increases, deliberately slow your mental process, not your action, your thinking. There is a crucial difference between the pace of thought and the pace of response. Military decision-makers, emergency physicians, and crisis negotiators all train a version of the same principle. The moment you feel urgency pushing you toward an immediate reaction, recognize that impulse as a signal to pause, not to act. Even 10 seconds of deliberate slowing, 4 deep breaths, a quick mental scan of your decision criteria can dramatically improve the quality of what follows. The observe, orient, decide, act cycle, used in military and emergency contexts worldwide, provides a reliable structure. What exactly is happening? Observe. What does this mean relative to your goals and values? Orient. What's the best available response? Decide. Execute it fully. Act. This 4-stage process takes seconds when practiced, and it converts reactive, fear-driven responses into deliberate, strategic ones. Prepare frameworks before crises arrive. You cannot design your decision-making architecture in the middle of a crisis. The time to build your frameworks is before you need them. Think about the categories of high-pressure decisions you are most likely to face in your professional and personal life. Financial shocks, relationship conflicts, career crossroads, health challenges, professional failures. For each category, invest time now, in a calm moment, thinking through your values, your non-negotiables, and your predetermined response to common scenarios. This preparation is not about scripting your reactions. It is about establishing the decision criteria so firmly in advance that when pressure arrives, you don't have to build a framework from scratch under duress. You simply apply one you've already constructed. Stress inoculation. The same principle that makes vaccines work applies to decision-making under pressure. Deliberate, graduated exposure to manageable levels of stress builds resilience that transfers to higher-stakes situations. Seek out low-stakes environments that require performance under pressure. Public speaking, competitive activities, tight deadlines for meaningful projects, difficult conversations you would naturally avoid. Each experience builds what might be called decision-making tolerance, the capacity to access clear thinking even when your nervous system is activated. Athletes call this competing in practice. Special operations professionals call it stress inoculation training. The mechanism is identical. Repeated exposure to manageable pressure builds the neurological pathways that allow performance in extreme pressure. Distinguishing real urgency from manufactured urgency. One of the most important skills in high-pressure decision-making is learning to accurately assess whether the pressure is real. Much of what feels urgent is not. It is other people's poor planning imposed on your schedule. It is social pressure masquerading as a deadline. It is emotional manipulation. I need an answer now, used to prevent you from thinking clearly enough to recognize a bad deal. Before accepting any pressure as legitimate, ask, What actually happens if I take more time? Who specifically benefits from a fast decision? And who benefits from a careful one? Is this deadline real, or is someone applying it to limit my options? Genuine urgency does exist, but it is far rarer than the cultural noise around it suggests. The social architecture of decision-making. No decision you make exists in isolation. Every choice is embedded in a web of relationships, social expectations, group dynamics, and cultural pressures that shape both the options you see and the consequences that follow. Most decision-making frameworks treat choices as if they happen in a vacuum. They don't. Why groups make us stupid? Human beings are wired for belonging. The need for social acceptance and the fear of social rejection are among the most powerful forces in human psychology. Powerful enough, in documented cases, to cause otherwise rational people to deny the evidence of their own eyes, rather than contradict a group consensus. Social proof, the heuristic of using other people's choices as a guide for your own, is useful when the people around you are genuinely knowledgeable and making decisions independently. It becomes catastrophically destructive when it devolves into herd behavior, everyone following everyone else in a cascade where nobody is actually evaluating the underlying merits. Financial manias throughout history follow this pattern without exception. The dot-com surge of the late 1990s, the American housing bubble of the mid-2000s, the cryptocurrency frenzies of recent years, all of them featured millions of intelligent individuals making terrible financial decisions because the social proof signal was overwhelming. Everyone was doing it, so it must be right. Before following any consensus, ask, did these people reach their conclusions independently or by watching each other? Do they have domain expertise or just strong opinions? What incentives might be shaping their positions? Authority without expertise. People in positions of authority command deference that frequently exceeds their actual knowledge in a given domain. This tendency evolved in environments where authority figures typically possessed superior relevant experience: the tribal elder, the master craftsperson, the village physician. In modern, specialized societies, authority in one domain provides essentially zero expertise in most others. Financial success does not automatically confer wisdom about relationships or health. Celebrity status creates no particular insight into political economy. Academic credentials in one field provide minimal foundation for authoritative claims in a different field. When evaluating any advice, evaluate the actual domain-specific track record and reasoning, not the status of the source. Reciprocity traps. When someone does something for you, your brain generates a powerful impulse to return the favor. Even when the favor was unsolicited, even when reciprocating would be against your interests, even when the imbalance between what you received and what you're being asked to give is wildly disproportionate. Sophisticated influence operators exploit this mechanism. They give small gifts, do small favors, create feelings of obligation, and then make large requests. The moment you notice that a favor or gift arrived just before a significant ask, apply deliberate scrutiny. Is the request genuinely merit-worthy, or am I feeling obligated rather than convinced? Building environments that support good choices. Your decisions are shaped by your environment more than most people realize or are comfortable admitting. The people you spend time with, the information you regularly consume, the physical spaces you inhabit, all of these continuously shape your default thinking patterns, your standard for what feels normal, and the options you notice at all. Invest as much deliberate attention in curating your environment as you invest in any other aspect of your development. This means choosing with real care which people you spend significant time with, Which information sources you trust enough to let shape your worldview, and which physical environments support or undermine your best thinking. The social dimension of decision-making is not an obstacle to overcome. It is a resource to be skillfully navigated. The best decisions often benefit enormously from the right social input, diverse perspectives, honest friction, the kind of challenge that forces you to refine and strengthen your thinking. Master the social dynamics of decision-making, and you will consistently find wisdom in community while maintaining the independence of judgment that keeps you from being swept into collective mistakes. Strategic thinking and the art of seeing. What others miss. Strategic thinkers and tactical thinkers face the same world. They see entirely different things. The tactical thinker sees the board as it is right now and makes the best available move given current conditions. The strategic thinker sees the board as it will be in 10 moves and positions themselves accordingly, often making moves that look suboptimal in the moment but prove decisive later. In almost every competitive domain, business, career advancement, personal finance, professional relationships, strategic thinkers consistently outperform tactical thinkers over any meaningful time horizon. Not because they are smarter, but because they are operating from a fundamentally different and more powerful mental framework. Pattern recognition as competitive advantage. Most genuinely successful strategies are not invented from scratch. They are applications of proven patterns from one context imported intelligently into a new one. The ability to recognize which patterns are operating in your current situation and to know which historical analogs are relevant gives strategic thinkers an enormous advantage in identifying opportunities before they become obvious. Study how transformative shifts have happened in fields beyond your own. How did companies in different industries navigate moments of technological disruption? How have different kinds of leaders managed organizational transitions? How have successful investors positioned themselves relative to economic cycles? Not to copy their specific tactics, context always matters, but to internalize the underlying strategic patterns that appear repeatedly across different domains. Problems as disguised opportunities. One of the most reliable hallmarks of strategic thinking is the ability to systematically reframe problems as opportunity structures. When most people see a problem, they experience discomfort and move away from it. When a strategic thinker sees a problem, they ask, who is suffering from this? How large is that group? What would they pay for a solution? What unique capabilities do I have to address it? The entire modern transportation revolution emerged from entrepreneurs who looked at the same frustrating problem, unreliable, overpriced urban taxi services that millions of people had complained about for decades, and asked a fundamentally different question. What would need to be true to solve this? Train yourself to reflexively ask, when encountering any friction, difficulty, or widespread frustration, what's possible here? Who can benefit from this being solved? How might this be approached from an angle that hasn't been tried? Timing and the art of the inflection point. Strategic thinkers develop sensitivity to timing that tactical thinkers entirely miss. The same opportunity acted upon at different moments can succeed brilliantly or fail completely. The question is not only whether an opportunity is real, it is whether the conditions for realizing it are currently present and whether they are likely to persist long enough to matter. Study cycles. Economic cycles that predictably alternate between expansion and contraction. Technological adoption cycles that move from early innovation to mainstream acceptance to commoditization. Social cycles that shift cultural values, preferences, and norms across generations. Positioning yourself in alignment with the direction of these cycles, rather than against them, is the foundation of durable strategic advantage. Competitive dynamics. Strategic thinkers don't just think about their own moves. They model how others will respond to their moves, and then model how they'll respond to those responses. This recursive analysis, what game theorists call multi-level strategic thinking, separates strategies that hold up under competitive pressure from those that collapse as soon as they meet resistance. Before committing to any significant strategic move, ask, if this succeeds, what does it reveal to others, and how will they respond? What would I do if I were trying to defeat this strategy? How can I structure my approach so that it remains effective even after sophisticated observers have had time to react? The psychology of actually doing what you decided to do. Here is where most self-development falls apart. You can read every book on decision-making ever written. You can master every framework, internalize every mental model, develop extraordinary clarity about what you should do. And then you can go do exactly what you've always done. Because deciding and doing are governed by entirely different psychological systems. The gap between knowing and doing is where potential goes to die. And it is far wider than most people want to admit. The biology of resistance. Your brain is not neutral about action. It is actively biased against it, specifically against actions that involve uncertainty, effort, novel challenge, or the possibility of failure. This bias exists because your ancestors lived in an environment where unnecessary action burned scarce calories and exposed them to real danger. Conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary risk was survival adaptive. In your life, where the primary threats are opportunity costs rather than physical dangers, this same bias manifests as procrastination, avoidance, perfectionism, and the remarkably sophisticated internal arguments your brain generates for why this is not quite the right moment to begin. Understanding this bias doesn't eliminate it, but it does allow you to stop interpreting it as a meaningful signal about whether you should act, and start treating it as simple background noise to be moved through. Minimize the gap. The most reliable predictor of whether a decision gets implemented is how quickly action follows intention. The longer the gap between deciding to do something and taking the first concrete step, competing priorities emerge, initial motivation fades, and your brain generates increasingly persuasive reasons to delay. For anything that takes less than 2 minutes, do it now. For everything else, commit to at least one concrete action within 24 hours of deciding. The specific action matters less than the principle. You are establishing momentum and creating a psychological commitment that makes future action easier. Design your environment for the decision you made. Your environment has an enormous and largely unconscious influence on your behavior. Instead of fighting your environment with willpower, a finite and unreliable resource, engineer it to make the behaviors you've chosen the path of least resistance. If you've decided to exercise daily, put your workout gear where you'll literally have to move it to go to bed. If you've committed to deep work in the mornings, make checking email technically difficult before 10 a.m. If you're building a reading habit, place books in every location where you have unstructured time. These environmental designs work automatically. They don't require willpower because they make the desired behavior the default behavior. Progressive implementation. The most common implementation failure is attempting to change everything at once. This strategy reliably overwhelms your mental resources, triggers resistance, and ends in abandonment, usually within 2 to 3 weeks, which conveniently creates a confirming story that you just aren't disciplined enough, rather than that your approach was structurally flawed. Begin with the smallest version of each change that still counts as the change. Not, I'll write a book, but I'll write 1 paragraph today. Not, I'll transform my health, but I'll take a 15-minute walk after dinner. Not I'll rebuild my professional network, but I'll have one genuinely focused conversation with someone interesting each week. Micro commitments compound. The behavior that starts as a tiny daily practice builds neural pathways, creates identity-level change, and becomes the foundation for progressively larger commitments as the pattern establishes itself. Accountability structures. Human beings perform differently when they are being observed and when their performance is tracked. Even by themselves. This is not a character flaw. It is a deeply wired feature of social mammals. Use it strategically. Share your commitments with people who will actually hold you to them, not just sympathetic friends who will comfort you when you fail, but people who genuinely expect you to follow through and will maintain that expectation respectfully but firmly. Join communities of people pursuing similar goals. Track your daily actions in a format you review regularly. The combination of social accountability and self-monitoring dramatically increases follow-through rates compared to silent, private commitment, not because you suddenly develop more discipline, but because you are now aligning your social identity with the behavior. Failure resilience. Every implementation plan encounters setbacks. Plans that don't account for this reality collapse at the first obstacle. Plans that anticipate setbacks and include a predetermined recovery protocol treat obstacles as events to be processed rather than verdicts about capability. Develop what might be called a failure protocol, a specific, brief set of actions that you execute whenever you fall off track. Review what happened, briefly without self-flagellation. Identify what adjustment would reduce the likelihood of the same obstacle reoccurring. Get back on track immediately. Move forward. The person who stumbles and recovers in a day consistently outperforms the person who doesn't stumble at all. Because the latter doesn't exist. Everyone stumbles. The variable is recovery speed. Advanced techniques for complex, high-stakes decisions. When you have mastered the foundational principles of sharp thinking, you are ready for the advanced techniques that handle the most complex and consequential situations. The career-defining, relationship-shaping, potentially life-changing decisions that require more than competent analysis. Multi-stakeholder analysis. Every significant decision creates ripple effects through a web of people and interests. Simple decision frameworks evaluate options for you, the decision maker, in isolation. Multi-stakeholder analysis maps every person and group affected by your choice, identifies their interests and reactions, and uses that map to find solutions that work across the full landscape of consequences. Begin by listing every stakeholder, including non-obvious ones, people affected by precedents you set, community implications, future versions of yourself with different circumstances and values. For each stakeholder, identify their primary interests, their level of influence over outcomes, and their probable reactions to different choices. This analysis frequently reveals win-win solutions that weren't visible from a single perspective. Option value thinking. In financial theory, an option is the right but not the obligation to take a specific action in the future. Paying for that right, even when you're uncertain you'll exercise it, has measurable value. The same logic applies to life decisions. Many choices matter not primarily for their immediate outcomes, but for the future options they create or eliminate. Taking a specific job might pay less than an alternative, but if it builds skills that open doors no amount of salary could buy, the option value may dwarf the immediate earnings difference. Choosing between two paths that look equivalent right now might look dramatically different when you trace their respective downstream option structures. Before making any significant commitment, map what it enables and what it forecloses. Preserve optionality wherever the cost of doing so is acceptable. Red team analysis. This approach, developed in military strategic planning, involves deliberately adopting the adversarial perspective, arguing against your own preferred choice as rigorously as possible, looking for every flaw, weakness, and potential failure mode. When using this technique on your own decisions, give yourself the job of disconfirming your preferred conclusion. What are the strongest arguments against it? What assumptions is it built on that might be wrong? What would a smart, well-informed critic say? What would someone who actively wanted this plan to fail identify as its vulnerabilities? The goal is not to talk yourself out of good decisions. It is to find the fatal flaws before you commit, and either address them or revise your assessment based on what you've discovered. Asymmetric risk management. Conventional risk management focuses on probability multiplied by impact. Advanced risk management adds a critical dimension: asymmetry. Some decisions have limited downside and open-ended upside. These are worth taking even at moderate probability levels. Others have open-ended downside and limited upside. These are worth avoiding even at high probability levels of success. Structure your decisions to maximize positive asymmetry. Investments of modest resources that could yield disproportionate returns. Side projects built on your existing skills. Low-cost experiments that could validate large opportunities. Skills developed at the cost of hours that could pay off across decades. Simultaneously, be ruthless about negative asymmetry. Any situation where the downside can cascade catastrophically while the upside is modest and bounded. Using financial leverage beyond your ability to withstand a sustained loss. Betting your professional reputation on a single high-profile initiative. Making irreversible life decisions based on very limited information. The return from asymmetric positive positions pursued consistently over time is remarkable. The cost of asymmetric negative exposures, however infrequently realized, can be catastrophic. Learning from failure. The upgrade cycle of sharp thinking. Every decision maker fails. The variable is not frequency of failure. It is quality of learning. The person who extracts deep, systematic, transferable lessons from their mistakes upgrades their decision-making operating system in ways that continuously compound. The person who avoids honest post-mortem analysis repeats the same errors in slightly different contexts, forever. The post-mortem protocol. Develop the habit of conducting structured analyses of significant decisions after their outcomes become clear, especially the ones that didn't go as planned. The critical first step is separating outcome from process. A well-designed decision can produce a bad outcome through circumstances beyond your control. A poorly designed decision can produce a good outcome through luck. Learning from outcomes alone teaches you the wrong lessons. Learning from process. Was my thinking clear? Did I identify the right criteria? Did I gather quality information? Did I account for my known biases? Teaches you what actually drives your decision quality. Pattern recognition in your own failures. Random failures are informative but not alarming. Systematic failures, the same types of mistakes recurring across different decisions in different contexts, reveal deeply embedded thinking errors that will continue producing the same outcomes until deliberately addressed. Keep a decision journal that captures not just what you decided and what happened, but the reasoning process you used. Review it periodically, monthly, quarterly, annually, looking for patterns. Do you consistently underestimate how long complex projects take? Do you routinely ignore relationship warning signs that later prove significant? Do you systematically overestimate your ability to change other people's entrenched behaviors? Each identified pattern represents a specific upgrade target for your decision-making process. Learning from other people's failures. One of the highest leveraged learning strategies available is studying the failures of others with rigorous analytical attention, not for entertainment, but for extractable lessons. Business case studies of spectacular organizational failures, historical examples of strategic miscalculations, documented patterns of relationship breakdowns and financial disasters. The key is reading with a specific question in mind. What decision-making errors contributed to this outcome? What cognitive biases were operating? What information was available but ignored? What warning signs appeared early that were dismissed? What framework would have produced a different decision? A well-curated library of others' failures, studied analytically, can provide more protective decision-making value than years of personal trial and error. Building decision-making habits that last a lifetime. Exceptional decision-making is not the result of heroic effort in critical moments. It is the result of habits so deeply ingrained that the right process runs automatically, even under pressure, even when you're tired, even when the emotional pull towards shortcuts is powerful. The most transformative shift in your decision-making is not learning a new technique. It is turning the right techniques into default behavior. The pause habit. Before making any significant commitment, your first response is a pause, not a hesitation born of anxiety, but a deliberate, practiced creation of space between stimulus and response. Let me think about that. I need to sleep on this. I'll get back to you tomorrow. This single habit, applied consistently, prevents the overwhelming majority of genuinely impulsive, emotionally driven, regret-producing decisions. The cue. Any significant commitment, any strong emotional reaction about a choice, any situation where you feel pressured to decide immediately. The routine. Pause. Create space. The reward. Better outcomes from more deliberate choices. The information habit. Before finalizing important decisions, systematically gather relevant information from multiple independent sources, not because you must have perfect information, you never will, but because the marginal improvement from adequate research versus no research is consistently enormous. Create specific checklists for different decision categories: career decisions, industry research, conversations with people who hold the role you're considering, honest assessment of what the opportunity costs. Financial decisions, comparison of realistic options, independent analysis that isn't motivated by '不为 commission. Relationship decisions, extended observation across multiple contexts and conditions, input from people who know you well. The values alignment habit. Before finalizing any significant decision, check it against your core values and long-term goals. Does this choice support the person I am working to become? Will I be proud of this decision when I look back on it in 5 years? This check takes seconds once you have clearly articulated your values, which is worth the investment of an afternoon. Write them down. Review them regularly. The people who consistently make values-aligned decisions, even when those decisions involve short-term sacrifice, report significantly higher long-term life satisfaction than those who optimize for immediate convenience. The review habit. Schedule reviews of your significant decisions at regular intervals, monthly for short-term choices, quarterly for medium-term ones, annually for major long-term commitments. Ask, is this producing the results I expected? What needs adjustment? What have I learned? This habit closes the feedback loop that transforms every decision into a learning opportunity, rather than an isolated event. Over time, it produces a continuously upgrading decision-making system, one that gets measurably better through deliberate reflection, rather than stagnating or slowly declining through accumulated unchallenged bias. Technology as a decision-making tool. In the age of artificial intelligence and ubiquitous information, The quality of your decisions increasingly reflects how effectively you use technology, not as a replacement for your judgment, but as a force multiplier for it. The fundamental principle: technology should extend your cognitive capabilities, not replace them or override them. Information management. Modern technology provides unprecedented access to high-quality information and, simultaneously, unprecedented exposure to low-quality information, misinformation, and emotionally optimized content designed to distort rather than inform your judgment. Build deliberate systems for finding and curating reliable information sources. Favor primary sources over aggregators, original research over summarized headlines, slow-moving expert analysis over real-time opinion. Use your information environment the way a professional athlete uses their training environment. Design it intentionally for the outcomes you want. Remove what degrades performance and add what enhances it. Decision support systems. Various digital tools can help structure your decision-making process. Frameworks for building decision matrices, tools for mapping decision trees, applications for tracking decisions and outcomes over time. Use them as scaffolding for your own thinking. They organize your analysis and reveal gaps in your reasoning. Do not use them as substitutes for judgment. Any tool is only as good as the quality of thinking that feeds it. Structure built on flawed inputs produces flawed outputs, just more efficiently. Automation of routine decisions. A significant fraction of the decisions you make daily neither require nor benefit from conscious deliberation. Automate them wherever possible. Investment contributions, recurring health-supporting behaviors, environmental structures that make beneficial default choices automatic. This is not laziness. It is strategic conservation of your most valuable cognitive resource. Decision-making draws on the same pool of mental energy as every other demanding cognitive activity. Every unnecessary decision made from that pool leaves less available for the decisions that genuinely matter. Eliminate the unnecessary ones systematically. Digital minimalism for clearer thinking. Perhaps the most counterintuitive technology principle for decision-making, the best thing technology can do for your judgment is sometimes stay out of the way. Constant connectivity, notification saturation, and algorithmic content feeds are specifically designed to fragment your attention and prevent the sustained, deep thinking that consequential decisions require. Implement deliberate technology boundaries. Device-free periods, notification-free deep work hours, environments, physical and digital, that support uninterrupted reflection. The capacity for sustained, deep, uninterrupted thinking is becoming increasingly rare. It is the foundation of exceptional judgment. Protect it vigorously, mastering your decision-making destiny. You are standing at a threshold. Everything in this audiobook has been building toward this moment. The frameworks, the mental models, the emotional intelligence techniques, the implementation psychology, all of it has been equipping you for the decision you are about to make right now. That decision is simply this: are you going to use any of this? I'll be honest with you, because that's what respect requires. Most people who listen to content like this will feel genuinely inspired for a day or two. They will tell someone about a concept they found particularly compelling. And then, gradually, without drama, without a conscious decision to abandon their intentions, they will drift back to exactly the decision-making patterns they've always used. The knowledge stays theoretical. The habits never form. The life doesn't change. Not because the person lacks intelligence or genuine desire for something different, but because they never cross the line from consuming information to actually implementing it. You have the choice, right now, to be a different kind of person than that. Accept full authorship of your life. The single most powerful shift in your decision-making destiny begins with accepting complete responsibility for your choices and their consequences, not circumstances, not other people, not bad luck, not timing. You, your choices, your results. This is not a statement about justice or fairness. Plenty of people face genuine disadvantages that others don't. It is a statement about agency, the degree to which you operate as the author of your choices, rather than as a character in a story written by circumstances and other people's decisions, determines the degree to which you can actually change your outcomes. Every major trajectory of your life, professional, financial, relational, physical, is primarily a compound result of thousands of individual decisions made over time. Many seemed small when you made them. The compound effect of all of them produced exactly the conditions you're in right now. This is empowering news because it means the compound effect of your future decisions, made more deliberately with better information through cleaner frameworks, can produce dramatically different conditions. You don't need permission to start. You don't need anyone else to change. You can begin applying better decision-making processes today. That is total, immediate, available agency. Build confidence through competence. Decision-making confidence doesn't come from optimism or self-talk. It comes from building genuine competence, from applying frameworks to real choices and watching the results improve, from developing a track record of following your process even when it's difficult, from the evidence of your own decision journal showing that your quality of thinking has genuinely gotten better over time. Start applying the clear framework to decisions today, including small ones. Practice stakeholder analysis when planning anything that affects other people. Apply the 10-year test to every significant choice. These micro-applications build the decision-making muscles that will serve you when the stakes are highest. Build your personal system. What you've learned in this audiobook is a foundation. Your job now is to customize it, to build a personalized decision-making architecture that accounts for your specific strengths and vulnerabilities, your particular cognitive blind spots, your values, and long-term vision. What are the 3 most common decision-making errors you make? Design specific countermeasures for each. What types of decisions do you tend to make well? Double down on the approaches that work. What domains of your life most need clearer decision-making? Start there. The system you build over the coming months, through practice, reflection, and continuous refinement, will become one of the most valuable assets you possess. Unlike skills that depreciate or advantages that erode, a well-designed decision-making system only gets better with use. Develop courage. The best decisions are rarely the easiest ones. They involve uncertainty. They require sacrifice of present comfort for future value. They sometimes disappoint people who are invested in you choosing differently. They demand that you say no to good options so you can say yes to great ones. Decision-making courage is not fearlessness. It is the willingness to act clearly despite fear, to follow your analysis even when the social pressure is toward a different choice, to make the decision your future self will thank you for even when your present self finds it uncomfortable. Build courage gradually by practicing with smaller decisions. Say no to a commitment that doesn't align with your priorities. Have a conversation you've been avoiding. Take a calculated risk on something that matters to you. Each act of decision-making courage builds the capacity for the next. Commit to the long game. Mastery in decision-making is not a destination. It is an ongoing practice. The most exceptional decision-makers you will ever meet are simultaneously the most humble about their capabilities, the most committed to continuous learning, and the most genuinely curious about where their thinking still falls short. Stay curious about how great decision makers across different fields approach complex choices. Study biographies that illuminate how transformative achievers navigated their most consequential moments. Remain open to the possibility that some of your most entrenched beliefs are wrong, and that updating them could unlock options you currently can't see. The quality of your decisions is one of your most powerful and durable assets in a complex, rapidly changing world. It compounds. It transfers across every domain. It serves you at every stage of your life, in every context, regardless of how circumstances evolve. Your future self is shaped by the choices your present self makes. Every decision is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming and the kind of life you are building. You now have the architecture. You have the frameworks. You have the understanding of why your brain works the way it does and exactly what to do about it. The knowledge is complete. The application begins now. What will you choose? The daily practice of an exceptional decision maker. Understanding decision-making theory and living it daily are two completely different things. The gap between them is where most people get stuck. What follows is a practical breakdown of how the principles in this book translate into daily habits, rituals, and routines that compound into extraordinary judgment over years and decades. The morning clarity practice. The first 30 minutes of your day have disproportionate influence on the quality of your thinking for everything that follows. Most people spend this window reacting, checking their phone, scanning news, absorbing the day's first flood of notifications. By the time they arrive at their first significant decision of the day, their mental state has already been shaped by dozens of external inputs, few of which they would have chosen deliberately. Exceptional decision makers protect this window. Before engaging with the external world, they spend time, even 10 or 15 minutes, in directed reflection. What decisions face them today? What matters most? What assumptions are they carrying into the day that might deserve examination? This brief morning clarity practice is not productivity theater. It is cognitive architecture maintenance, keeping the decision-making system calibrated before the day's friction gets to work on it. Specific practices vary by individual, but the research consistently supports a few elements. Some form of quiet reflection or journaling that activates the prefrontal cortex before the limbic system gets hijacked by incoming stimuli. A brief review of your highest priority commitments and values, and a moment of explicit intention setting for the most important choices you'll face. This practice does not require hours. It requires intention and consistency. 10 minutes of daily deliberate mental preparation, maintained across months and years, produces a measurably different decision maker than 10 minutes of morning social media scrolling. The evening review protocol. At the end of each day, the sharpest decision makers do something that most people never think to do. They briefly review the decisions they made and how those decisions aligned with their stated values and intentions. This does not have to be elaborate. 3 questions, answered honestly in a journal or even in a quiet moment before sleep. What was the best decision I made today? And what made it good? What was the most questionable decision I made? And what drove it? What one thing would I do differently if I had the day to do over? This practice builds something invaluable, a continuously updated, highly accurate model of your own decision-making patterns. Over weeks and months, patterns emerge from the journal that would be invisible without the record. You begin to notice, with increasing precision, which conditions reliably produce your best thinking and which conditions reliably compromise it. You see which types of decisions you consistently handle well and which consistently trip you up. You develop, through evidence rather than self-assessment, a genuinely accurate picture of your decision-making strengths and vulnerabilities. That picture is the raw material of continuous improvement. The weekly strategic pause. Once per week, ideally at a fixed time that you treat as a non-negotiable appointment, spend 30 to 60 minutes in what might be called a strategic review. This is not task management or calendar planning, though both may flow from it. This is genuine strategic thinking. Are the decisions you're making daily actually moving you toward the outcomes you say matter to you? Many people live with a significant and largely unexamined gap between their stated priorities and their actual daily choices. They say they prioritize their health, but their daily decisions consistently deprioritize it. They say they value deep work and focused professional contribution, but they've allowed their schedule to fill with reactive, low-leverage activity. They say their most important relationships are central to their life, but they consistently choose competing demands over investing in those relationships. The weekly strategic pause creates space to close this gap, not through self-criticism, but through honest observation and deliberate recommitment. What's working? What needs adjustment? What has your actual behavior told you about your true priorities, as distinct from your aspired priorities? This one practice, maintained consistently over years, has produced more genuine life course corrections in thoughtful people than any other single habit I'm aware of. The decision threshold system. One of the most practical structural tools an exceptional decision maker can implement is a personal decision threshold system, a set of predetermined rules that specify which decisions get processed through which level of deliberation. Not all decisions warrant the same cognitive investment. Routine, low stakes, reversible choices, what to eat for lunch, which article to read first, how to sequence your morning tasks, can and should be made quickly, often by default, with minimal deliberate processing. The mental energy saved by not agonizing over trivial choices is available for the decisions that actually matter. Significant, high-stakes, or irreversible decisions, career moves, major financial commitments, relationship choices, public positions, deserve a full deliberate process. The clear framework, stakeholder analysis, red team thinking, adequate information gathering, and sufficient time for reflection. The failure mode most intelligent people fall into is applying excessive deliberation to low-stakes decisions, a form of perfectionism that wastes mental energy and delays action on small things, while simultaneously underinvesting in high-stakes decisions, a form of avoidance driven by the discomfort of genuine uncertainty. Developing accurate calibration about which decisions belong in which category is itself a high-value skill. Cultivating the right advisors. No decision-making system operates in isolation, and no individual thinker, however skilled, can see all their own blind spots. The most exceptional decision-makers deliberately cultivate a diverse inner circle of advisors who collectively provide what no single perspective could. This does not mean surrounding yourself with people who agree with you. That is the opposite of what is needed. It means building a network that includes people who know your industry deeply and people who bring genuinely outside perspectives. People who share your fundamental values and people who will challenge your assumptions vigorously. People who support your goals wholeheartedly and people who will ask whether those goals are actually worth pursuing. The specific composition matters less than the principle. You want deliberate diversity of perspective, genuine willingness to challenge you, and a track record of caring more about your actual well-being than your momentary comfort. Seek advisors who have demonstrated their own good judgment, not necessarily advisors who are universally admired or credentialed, but people whose own decision-making track record you respect and whose reasoning process you find genuinely illuminating. The art of deciding in stages. One of the most sophisticated techniques available for navigating irreversible, high-stakes decisions is staging your commitment, moving through a sequence of progressively deeper commitments, each of which generates information and reduces uncertainty before requiring the next level of investment. Instead of treating a major career change as a single all-or-nothing decision, treat it as a sequence of smaller experiments, researching the alternative field while staying in your current role, conducting informational interviews with people already in that world, taking on a project at the periphery of your current work that builds directly relevant skills, testing market demand for what you'd offer before fully committing. Each stage reduces the uncertainty of the next. Instead of making a large financial commitment based primarily on projected returns, start with a smaller commitment that gives you real-world data about how the investment actually performs and how you actually respond to its volatility before scaling up. This staged approach does not eliminate the ultimate commitment. Most transformative moves eventually require full commitment, but it dramatically improves the quality of the decision you make when that commitment comes, because you are deciding based on evidence rather than projection alone. Integrating sharp thinking into relationships. Perhaps the least discussed dimension of decision-making practice is how it integrates with the people closest to you. Your most important decisions are almost never made in isolation. They involve partners, family members, close friends, and colleagues whose lives are materially affected by your choices. Bringing the principles of sharp thinking into these relationships requires particular care. The same intellectual discipline that serves you powerfully in professional contexts can come across as cold, clinical, or dismissive of emotional reality in intimate ones. People who feel that their concerns are being processed as data inputs rather than heard as human experiences will not engage honestly with a decision process, however well designed. The foundation of good collaborative decision-making in close relationships is psychological safety. The genuine confidence that honest expression, including disagreement and concern, will be met with curiosity rather than defensiveness or dismissal. Creating this environment requires consistent modeling of intellectual humility. I might be wrong about this. What am I missing? Tell me more about that concern. Help me understand your reasoning. When high-quality psychological safety exists in a relationship, the decision-making capability of two people together genuinely exceeds what either could produce alone. Not because two brains are always better than one, but because each person's blind spots are partially visible to the other, and genuine dialogue creates insights that neither perspective could generate in isolation. Decision-making as identity. There is a final dimension to building exceptional decision-making that goes beyond technique, habit, and framework. It is identity. The people who most consistently make excellent decisions, who maintain their decision quality under pressure over long time horizons across widely varied domains and circumstances, have done something deeper than learning techniques. They have internalized a particular identity. They are people who think clearly. They are people who take decisions seriously. They are people who hold themselves to a high standard of intellectual honesty and are willing to be uncomfortable in service of getting things right. This identity becomes self-reinforcing when clear thinking is part of who you are, not just a practice you try to do, but a description of the kind of person you consider yourself to be. The cognitive habits associated with it become far easier to maintain. You don't have to motivate yourself to do the post-mortem on a bad decision, because people who think clearly do post-mortems. You don't have to fight the urge to avoid difficult information, because people who care about accuracy seek out what they don't want to hear. Build this identity deliberately. Use language that reflects it. I'm the kind of person who thinks before committing. I'm someone who actively looks for what I might be missing. I make decisions based on what my values say, rather than what feels comfortable in the moment. This is not affirmation. It is identity architecture. The language you use about yourself shapes the choices that feel available and natural over time. Every decision you make from this day forward is a vote for a particular kind of person. Cast those votes with intention. Cast them consistently. Cast them with the full understanding that the person you are building, one choice at a time, is the most consequential creation of your entire life. The quality of your thinking shapes the quality of your decisions. The quality of your decisions shapes the quality of your outcomes. The quality of your outcomes shapes the quality of your life. This chain is not destiny. It is design. You now hold the blueprint. Build something extraordinary. The compound interest of clear thinking. There is a concept in finance that most people understand intellectually, but very few truly feel in their gut. Compound interest. The idea that growth builds on itself, that each increment of improvement creates a slightly larger base from which the next increment grows, produces outcomes that feel almost magical over long enough time horizons. $1 invested at 10% annual return becomes $1.10 after 1 year. Unremarkable. After 10 years, it becomes $2.59. Still modest. After 30 years, it becomes $17.45. After 50 years, $117.39. The number that started as a single dollar has grown by more than 100-fold, not because anything dramatic happened in any single year, but because consistent, modest improvement compounded relentlessly over time. Your decision-making ability compounds in exactly the same way. Every time you apply a deliberate framework instead of defaulting to instinct, you are depositing a small increment of growth into your decision-making account. Every time you conduct an honest post-mortem on a choice that didn't go as planned, you are earning a return on experience rather than simply suffering a loss. Every time you seek out the perspective that challenges your assumption rather than the one that confirms it, you are strengthening a mental muscle that will serve you in every domain for the rest of your life. These individual deposits feel almost insignificantly small in the moment. But compounded across months, years, and decades, they produce a quality of judgment that looks almost miraculous from the outside and is completely explicable from the inside. Because you can see every deposit that went into building it. The reverse is also true. Every decision made on autopilot, every avoided post-mortem, every bias left unexamined and unaddressed. These are withdrawals from the same account. The person who lives entirely reactively, never examining their patterns, never upgrading their frameworks, never developing the intellectual courage to question their own conclusions, is not standing still in their decision-making ability. They are slowly, imperceptibly declining, because the world is becoming more complex while their tools for navigating it remain fixed. There is no neutral. You are either investing in your decision-making capability, or you are allowing it to erode. What this means for you, right now, you have just invested several hours in the most foundational cognitive skill available to any human being. You have not merely learned about decision-making. You have been exposed to a complete operating system for clear thinking that, if applied with consistency and genuine intention, will produce measurably better outcomes across every significant domain of your life. The question now is not whether you found it interesting. The question is what you do next. I want to offer you a specific, simple implementation challenge, not because it is all you need to do, but because it is a start. And starting is where the compound interest begins. Choose one decision you are currently facing, one that matters, one that you have perhaps been avoiding or circling around without fully engaging. Apply the clear framework to it today. Clarify exactly what decision you're making. List at least 5 genuine options. Evaluate them systematically. Set a decision date and honor it. Schedule a review. That is one complete pass through a better decision-making process than most people apply to most of the significant choices in their lives. One practice. Today. Then do it again tomorrow with a different decision. And again the day after. After 30 days, the framework will begin to feel natural rather than mechanical. After 90 days, it will begin to feel like how you actually think. After a year, you will look back on the person you were before and find it genuinely difficult to understand how you operated without it. The deeper purpose. Sharp thinking is not just a performance tool, a way to succeed faster, earn more, advance further, though it certainly contributes to all of those things. At a deeper level, clear thinking is an act of respect for yourself, for the people your choices affect, and for the brief, irreplaceable period of time you have to inhabit a life. Every major regret in human life ultimately traces back to a decision, a road not taken, a commitment made without real consideration, a warning ignored, a relationship mishandled, a moment of courage bypassed in favor of comfort. These regrets are almost never the result of bad luck. They are almost always the result of poor decision-making, thinking too short-term, listening too much to fear or social pressure, failing to apply the kind of deliberate reflection that would have revealed the better path. You cannot eliminate regret from a human life. Uncertainty is real. Outcomes are never fully in our control. Some losses are unavoidable, but you can dramatically reduce the proportion of your regrets that trace back to preventable thinking errors. You can build a decision-making system that, over time, produces a life whose arc you recognize as authentically yours, chosen deliberately, constructed intentionally, aligned with what you actually value rather than what you fell into. That is what sharp thinking, practiced consistently and applied with genuine intention, ultimately delivers. Not a perfect life, but a consciously chosen one. And that is everything. The 30-Day Decision Challenge. Before you close this audiobook and move into the rest of your day, I want to leave you with something concrete. A 30-day practice challenge designed to translate everything you've heard into lived experience rather than theoretical knowledge. The challenge has 3 components, each requiring less than 10 minutes daily. Component 1, the morning question. Each morning before you engage with your phone, your email, or any external input, write down one sentence answering this question. What is the most important decision I will face today? And what do I know about how I want to approach it? This takes 3 minutes. Over 30 days, it builds the habit of beginning each day with intention rather than reaction. It primes your decision-making system before the day's demands activate it, and it creates a 30-entry record of how you think about what matters, which is itself revealing information. Component 2, the evening reflection. Each evening before sleep, write 3 sentences. 1 identifying the best decision you made that day and why. 1 identifying a decision you're less satisfied with and what drove it. And 1 noting what you would do differently with the benefit of hindsight. This takes 5 minutes. Over 30 days, it creates a document of your own thinking patterns that no personality assessment or outside evaluation could match for accuracy and relevance. Component 3, the weekly practice decision. Once per week, identify 1 decision that you would normally make on autopilot and apply the full, clear framework to it deliberately, even if the decision is relatively small. This builds procedural fluency with the framework in low-stakes contexts, so that the process is well rehearsed when genuinely high-stakes situations arise. That's the challenge. 30 days. Less than an hour of total time per week. The compound return on this investment, if you actually do it, will exceed anything I could promise you in words. The knowledge is complete. The decision is yours. Choose sharply.